Hello and welcome to Watch From Home Theater, our little corner of the internet where we get to watch movies together even while we're apart. I'm Clint Gage, and this week I am very excited about what we're watching. We're going to watch Full Metal Jacket, and we'll be joined here in just a minute by Matthew Modine, which is, like I said, very exciting. But also, this episode is brought to you by Movies Anywhere. Now, for those unfamiliar, Movies Anywhere is a service for collectors, and it lets you add movies that you've purchased from all the different platforms you can purchase movies on. You can add them to... I just scrolled. Excuse me. Add movies purchased from different locations into one easy-to-manage digital library. Watch your favorite movies from the comfort of your living room on your TV with the Movies Anywhere app. And Screen Pass, which is one of the newest features of Movies Anywhere, allows you to give your friends access to your movies without those movies leaving your precious collection, which is the most difficult thing to do for a movie collector. Now, all your friends need is a free Movies Anywhere account of their own. And thanks to the power of Movies Anywhere, you can watch together even when you're apart, which is a thing that I love to say at the top of this show since we started doing this show. So, I'm on board for that. But it is the only co-view option for owned digital movies. Okay, so you can get rid of that pesky syncing over 3, 2, 1 kind of count. You can watch a synced viewing experience with up to 9 friends, and even better, the host has the ability to control playback for all guests, making the movie night a breeze. So there's no need for any of those weird web browser extensions. So to do this, all you have to do is the host will need to log in to Movies Anywhere, click on My Movies, then select Full Metal Jacket, locate the Screen Pass button. Once you click on that, that will generate a link that you can share with your friends. And then your guests will want to make sure that they're logged in to their account, visit the URL that the host has generated, and accept the Screen Pass, like you see here. And then, meanwhile, back on the host side of things, you select the Watch Together button, and that will create a lobby. So it brings you to this lobby screen that houses the share room codes that you'll want to give your friends. So then back over to the guest side of things, you do the same thing, except select I'm a guest once you get in here to this screen here. Once you're in this room, you just input the host room code. And then after that, the final step is just enjoying a perfectly synced viewing experience, which is frankly the easiest part of this whole thing. But that's it. That's Movies Anywhere, and it's honestly super easy. I recently was trying to watch a Metallica concert with some friends of mine, and it was frankly miserable because we were half on Zoom and half on the thing. So this is probably the reason why I'm going to revisit a Metallica concert with my old high school buddies. But anyway, so now that you know how it works, go set up your free Movies Anywhere account. There's a link in the description. If Full Metal Jacket is not in your collection, purchase it, and then you can send a Screen Pass to your friends so you can watch together wherever you are. Now, while you go and do that, I'm going to invite some of my friends to join me here. First, from IGN, Terry Schwartz. Terry, how are you?
I am so excited to be here watching this movie with you guys tonight. This is kind of a dream come true, and something that we probably wouldn't have imagined happening a year ago, but now is a wonderful new reality we have to all hang out together virtually apart.
Nice. Yeah. Watch From Home Theater, where dreams come true. That's going to be the new tagline. So that's enough out of us, though. Let's get to our newest friend. Let's invite him in here. Ladies and gentlemen, Private Joker from Full Metal Jacket. Matthew Modine is here. Thanks for joining us, Matthew.
What's up, man? It's
How
nice
you
to
doing?
be here. Thank you. I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right.
Good.
I'm in Southern California. I live in New York City, but it's a beautiful day, and I'm going to be about a movie that seems to have stood the test of time.
Yeah, you got
Now,
a beautiful patch
Matt,
of sky with some trees back there. It's a nice view.
some palm trees. Yeah. No, right before this, I asked you a question that I should have waited to ask on the air, but I was curious when the last time you actually watched Full Metal Jacket was.
I don't even remember the last time I watched it. I've seen some bits of this because Leon Vitali, who I say it without exaggeration, Stanley Kubrick stood on Leon Vitali's shoulders. There's not an aspect of filmmaking that Leon doesn't understand, and of course Stanley was his mentor and taught him so much about filmmaking. But Leon went in, and he's doing Clockwork Orange right now, mastering these 4K digital transfers of Stanley Kubrick's films. So I've seen little excerpts of Full Metal Jacket.
Well,
It's extraordinary because the amount of information that you're able to pull off of a piece of film negative.
Yeah, it's incredible what they're doing with the remasters. But looking back on this film, on Full Metal Jacket, for you, what was it like as a young actor to land a movie like this?
I'm kidding, obviously.
Oh, I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit. We didn't even hear. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was like an opportunity of a lifetime, to have the chance to work with the filmmaker of Stanley Kubrick's reputation, and on a film that is about more than the Vietnam War, but it's a story about human beings and the nature of war in general, and the effects of it on people's lives, particularly in the case of this story, the people who played in battle.
And you have a pretty incredible story too, where it's actually, I believe, thanks to Val Kilmer that you got this role, right? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I do, it always sounds like I'm dragging Val Kilmer when I talk about it, but it's a story that's in my diary, which I encourage, if you love Full Metal, if you're curious about it was a limited edition book. There's only 20,000 copies of the book, but the Adam Rakoff, who was one of the geniuses that used to work for Steve Jobs at Apple Computer, he really loved my book, and he asked me if I'd like to make it into an iPad app. And I said, "What do you mean an iPad app?" And he said, "Well, we take all the assets of the book, the words, and have you record them, and then we put some music and sound effects." And did I lose you?
No, we're still here.
It's the screen. I'm still here.
We're very still people.
And
yes.
Yeah, I said, well, that sounds extraordinary. How you do all these high-res scans of the negatives and the voiceover and all these things. He goes, well, that's the difficult part. And then he spent the next year with some other geniuses putting together and building this incredibly powerful app, which is available for iPads. And so if you're really curious about the story about Val Kilmer, I'd encourage you to download the app. I mean, it's only a couple dollars, and it's an extraordinary behind-the-scenes look at working with Stanley Kubrick, and from my point of view. It's not a reflection today looking back. It's the kid that went off to work with Stanley Kubrick on the film. Perspective on what that experience was like. But this about Val Kilmer, it was, I was at a restaurant with another actor having pancakes, and the restaurant that Annie Hall was made famous because Woody Allen drove the Cadillac into the restaurant, and my friend and I, because in movies, it's really funny when somebody drives a car into a restaurant, like Woody Allen. But in real life, people get crushed and killed, you know. So there was a person that was sitting opposite me, and he was looking at me, and he was looking at me with tremendous disgust and anger, and he appeared to be swearing while he was looking at me. And I told my friend, I said, maybe that guy has Tourette's, or he is an actor learning a monologue, but he's clearly looking at me and calling me an asshole, etc. And he looked, my friend looked over his shoulder and he said, "Oh, that's Val Kilmer. He's a really nice guy." And so the long story short, Val Kilmer had auditioned for the film and I didn't. And I ran out and asked, he told me that he heard that I was doing Stanley Kubrick's movie. And as I say, I hadn't auditioned. And so I called my manager and asked him if he knew anything about it. And he said he didn't. And I said, well, I know Stanley Kubrick makes his movies with Warner Brothers. Why don't Harold Becker to send Quest, which was a film about a high school wrestler that I'd finished, and we'll send that to Stanley Kubrick. And Acker, who I made a movie Birdie with, was in England editing the Birdie to complete it in time for the Cannes Film Festival. I sent him some scenery, and Harold Becker sent Vision Quest, and then several weeks later, I ripped New York City, a director named Stanley Kubrick. And he introduced me, said, "Hello, my name is Stanley Kubrick. I'm a film director, and this is a project that I'm working on, and I wonder if you'd consider being in it." That was it. I mean, I think it's a great insight into the humility and character of Stanley Kubrick that he'd introduce himself in a letter as a filmmaker.
Right. It's
Absolutely
fascinating that, just to distinguish this Stanley Kubrick from all the other Stanley Kubricks that, I'm the one that's the film director. I will say that I was listening to your to the audiobook version of the diary, and it is really cool. I love the sound design and everything in it. It's a very interesting listen. But one of the things, it does open with a foreword that sort of addresses, and I'm going to try real hard not to just ask you over and over throughout this movie tonight, what was it like working with Stanley Kubrick? But it does open with the foreword of you sort of like, okay, let's just get this out of the way. So like just a small taste of sort of what it was like, what the process was like in working with Kubrick.
Yeah. I mean, it's the first question. What was Stanley like? That's the opening line in the diary and in the foreword. And because I'm asked that question almost weekly since the experience of working with Stanley Kubrick. I can see when somebody's walking across a room that they're going to ask the question. Their face has a certain kind of anticipation and excitement and curiosity, and you just can anticipate that that's what they're going to ask is, what was Stanley like? And I've been asked that question by Christopher Nolan, to Alan Parker, Robert Altman, what's his name? Alan Pakula. I mean, John Schlesinger. There's some extraordinary, legendary directors that I just mentioned, and each of them were curious what Stanley was like. Because the interesting thing about being a film director is that it's kind of like making love. That we all do it in a similar fashion, but each of us do it a little bit differently, right? And so I think that sort of says it, right? We all make love, but we all do it a little bit differently.
Especially Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
No, it's just great. I think. Oh, go ahead, Terry.
Oh no, I was going to say I do have a question before we dig into watching the movie because I rewatched it last night and I was just so struck by how many things are not only iconic in this film, but how many have infiltrated into pop culture in a way that people might find themselves quoting or referencing or seeing homages to it and have like lost the thread that this is the origin of it. And so I'm curious for people who are going to be rewatching it with us, could you share with us, like, what's something that you felt has followed you from the movie, from creating the movie to where we are now, maybe even that you hadn't anticipated at the time when you were making it?
Well, you've certainly never imagined things that you do or things that you say will become part of the vernacular, like
Right.
"me so horny, me love you long time," or take any one of dozens of lines in Hermes that you could suck a golf ball through a garden hose. It looks like the best part of you ran down the crack of your mama's ass and ended up a brown stain on the mattress. I mean, they're horribly disgusting and colorful and so descriptive, the things that Lee Ermey was able to string together in his insults during boot camp. But yeah, it's just, one of the things that Stanley Kubrick said to me in a joking manner, but obviously behind every joke, there's a little bit of truth. That's what makes them funny, is the irony of them, right? And Stanley, he said, the Queen was going to go see the opera, and she asked, what's on this season? And they said, Aida. And she said, oh, I've seen it. And he thought that was really funny because I believe that you should be able to listen to a good piece of music hundreds of times over the course of your life, and at different periods of your life, appreciate the music in different ways and have a different understanding of that piece of music. That's what Stanley Kubrick was trying to do with film, was that it shouldn't be something that you watch once and it becomes something that's disposable and that you toss out and say, well, I've seen it. I don't need to see that movie. That the experience of going back and listening, or watching in this case, watching and listening to a film, should be like a great piece of music. And that was why he said the Queen was stupid, because she didn't want to go to see Aida twice, which, is one of the great operas. And so
Right.
yeah, so you want to create something that stands the test of time, that has universals, truths that no matter what culture you come from, that there's a moral or intellectual significance to the story that you're telling, and something that runs much deeper than just a surface beauty or ugliness or horror. And when you think back of Stanley Kubrick's films, like The Shining was dismissed when the movie came out, and people thought it was obvious, and Jack Nicholson was crazy before the movie began. And Stanley said, of course he was crazy. He was bringing his family to the hotel to kill them. It wasn't. He didn't try to hide that. He was bringing them to kill them. So he had to be crazy from the start. He just got crazier. But yeah, the film was dismissed, and now it's considered one of the top 5 horror films of all time. Paths of Glory. I can watch Paths of Glory. Seen it a dozen. That Kirk Douglas's performance, the nuance and it's brilliant. Barry Lyndon was dismissed. 2001: A Space Odyssey, when they had the premiere in New York City, hundreds of people walked out of the theater. So like when we think of Van Gogh not being able to sell a painting in his lifetime, and now his paintings sell, some of the most valuable paintings in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well let's get to this particular Stanley Kubrick film. Let's get this thing going. And just a reminder, everybody watching, be sure to leave your questions for Matthew in the chat in whatever platform you're watching us on, and we'll try to get to a bunch of those during the show. Also, want to point out that Full Metal Jacket is an R-rated film. Obviously, there's a lot of material in there that. And Matthew, you beat me to a couple of them. There's a lot of stuff in there that can be difficult to watch and to hear, and some colorful and gross, I think, or disgusting is how you described it. There's plenty of that in there. So just please be aware of that as we get going. But I think that is enough business from us. So hopefully you've had enough time to get your Movies Anywhere account set up. Have you sent that screen pass? Created the virtual lobby where you can watch together with a friend. Hope so. We're all squared away here. And now that we're dear friends, sharing my copy of Full Metal Jacket, let's get this going. So we will also have a time code playing on screen for you. So if you want to sync up with us a little bit more that way, you can. That's where we're at time code wise. But let's do this. Everybody, all those Screen Pass hosts out there, you ready? We're going to start the watch along right now. Go.
I'm just gonna close the door. Close the door.
It's all right. It's just the Warner Brothers logo.
Terry's, what's your favorite logo? Favorite production logo?
My favorite logo. Why do I never come prepared for that?
I
think
it's my favorite question.
I think it's got to be Fox, because as a child, it was synonymous to me with Star Wars. I did not differentiate that the opening score for Star Wars started after the Fox trumpet. So, all right, we're getting started. There he is. Matthew's first appearance on screen. Private Joker. And he missed it.
This is a really, really incredible little montage of just like what I think was one of the big ideas in the whole movie is just like this slow stripping away of everybody's kind of identity and humanity and everything. It starts right here with this, just everybody getting their head shaved. Matthew, how many times did you actually have to shave your head like this?
You're kidding, right?
I don't need an exact number.
Yeah, just the once. We shot the film back to front. You know, we shot Vietnam and then camp. So at this point, I'd already been working with Stanley Kubrick for a year. I'd been in England for a year. And just for the viewers, just so you know, because a lot of people assume that he was British, but he was from the Bronx in New York.
How was that for you, filming it back to front? Forgive me if that's a question you've been asked many times before. I haven't heard your answer previously, but this movie so much is about the Private Joker, like not witnessing the dehumanization of his fellow Marines around him, that for you to experience the Vietnam portion, but then have to go through kind of that first arc for him. How did that impact your performance or not?
Well, this was, I grew up with the Vietnam War, number one, and my oldest brother, Mark Jr., went to Vietnam. Then my brother, Phil and Michael, and my sister, Elizabeth, all joined the Navy. So the war came home in my, I think, 7th grade year of school. So I was about 12 or 13 years old. Actually, my brother Mark went much earlier than that. He went, what am I saying? No, it was, I was probably in 1st or 2nd grade. What am I saying? 7th grade. That's a little glitch in my brain. But anyway.
I wasn't going to challenge it.
Yeah, I was probably, I was young, much younger than that. But I remember when the war came home and watching Walter Cronkite on the news and how it went from being something abstract to something that had an impact on my family, that my brother could become one of the statistics, one of those people that was injured or killed. So it became something that was really real. And when I did Full Metal Jacket, I'd already done Birdie and Streamers, Robert Altman, about the Vietnam War. and Birdie was about post-traumatic stress. In fact, when script, he didn't say what character it was, and I thought that maybe because of Birdie, he was interested in me playing the role of Private Pyle. But, you know, and again, this was about the movie I had made, so quite normal and quite common to shoot scenes out of order, shoot sequences out of order. So it was all part of being a young professional.
Right.
I mean, this scene here, the opening scene, is especially after the song that's playing over the head shaving montage that kind of lulls you a little bit, and everybody's just kind of casually sitting there getting their haircuts, and then to just bolt straight into this, Lee Ermey screaming at everybody is such a jolt to start this movie.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of what it's like when you join the United States Marine Corps. You're a kid with a bunch of hair on your head, and all of a sudden you're stripped, you're naked, the hair is so important. How it defines us, how we choose to wear it, how we comb it. You know, is it long? Is it short? Is it medium? And so when you strip away that, and then you take away all your belongings, and you put every clothing and the same beds, and the uniformity of the whole thing it's all part of the process of stripping away individuality and making you begin to learn to work together as a group. You know, that you're not an individual, as Lee Ermey says in the film. You're part of the Corps. You know, you're not allowed to die unless the United States Marine Corps says you can die. Your government issue. You're a dog tag with a serial number.
Now there's
this whole, I mean, I was just going to say that this entire opening arc of the movie is really interesting because it throws you right into the story, which I don't think is something that Kubrick's movies don't necessarily handhold the viewer a lot. But in this, you really are following the story through the eyes of these recruits without a lot of context of like where is this going. As the viewer coming in that this is going to be about the Vietnam War, and you have the context of it being about the dehumanization of these characters. But it's so interesting, I think, the way the movie tells this story just through this seemingly like straightforward training that they're all experiencing. And I think Lee Ermey, in the way he I don't know, like the energy, the terrifying energy he brings through I can't imagine filming those sequences where he's just up in your face screaming these horrors at you.
We've actually got a question coming in from somebody in the audience. Peter Besser, who's watching on IGN, wants to know if you guys ever did like what we see Private Pyle here. If you guys ever did laugh at Lee Ermey, or did his rants actually scare the crap out of you?
No, of course we laughed, and it wasn't scary at all. No, and it was actually really hard to concentrate sometimes because he's not an actor. He wasn't really. I mean, he certainly was a great actor. I mean, subsequently after this, I remember he was in the movie with Sean Penn, Dead Man Walking, and he was in Mississippi Burning. He was a terrific actor, so I apologize for saying that to Lee. Amazing actor, and he won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. His performance is that great, but it was hard to have him yelling at you because his teeth were bad. He drank gallons of coffee, so you had nervous tension, coffee, cigarettes, because he smoked cigarettes too. And nervous tension, all that stuff yelling at you in his face. And then his throat started bleeding because, of course, a drill instructor only yells at the recruits like that for maybe an hour a day. And he was doing, 10, 12, 13 hours of that a day. So his throat started to bleed. So he was getting some steroid spray. So then you had steroid spray, cigarettes, blood, tobacco, coffee, and nervous tension, all that coming out of his mouth. And it was absolute horror.
And here we have, this is where, it really starts to set in what's going to happen to this guy. And these slaps that are coming up here, they were real slaps, correct? I mean, that's rough.
Yeah. Yeah, that was Vincent's choice, was to, because he had seen those scenes beforehand where he was punching me in the gut, and Lee had trouble pulling a punch, so a lot of times when he was punching and slapping me, he missed and would hit me. And so Vince just told Lee, he said, I don't want to do that. Let's just get it over with. Just hit me. And so Lee was nervous about that. And he went and spoke to Mr. Kubrick, and Stanley said, what? He asked you to hit him? He said, yeah, he just wants to get it over with. So, yeah, they didn't have to do multiple takes of that. I think it was maybe 2 takes of Vince getting slapped really hard. You saw, I mean, he hit him so hard his hat spun around on his head.
How much of it was precise in the script, and how much, if any, did he, I don't know, do improv? Horrible things like that? I'm curious, like, how precise the scenes were beforehand, or how much you guys had the flexibility to kind of find them as you were filming.
This first part of the film evolved because Lee Ermey was hired as a technical advisor on the film. There was another actor, Tim Colchieri, who was supposed to play the drill instructor. And when they were auditioning the background performers, he was doing a lot of that. And the extraordinary things that Lee would say in that, which were so funny, that found their way into the movie. You have to make, every director that I've worked with that's really good says that 90% of making a movie is casting the right actor. And it would, when Stanley was looking at Tim Colchieri and Lee Ermey, he had to make a very difficult decision, because Tim Colchieri is a wonderful actor, and he had to replace him. And Tim Colchieri becomes the door gunner in Vietnam in the next sequence of the film, where he's shooting women and children from the helicopter. That was the original drill instructor. So Lee replaced him. And so this, but I would say, your question was, the first act of this story is very well scripted, very well structured, and there wasn't a lot of improvisation. Now, what's really important for your audience to know is that, because people go to film school and they learn storyboarding and pre-visualizing their movies, and Stanley, while he did homework, tremendous amount of homework, and dreamed about the movie and pre-visioned it in his mind, when we were on the set, he never knew where he was going to put the camera until he saw the actor's performance. And so when we came to set, Stanley would say, okay, do it. And if some actor was going half speed, he'd say, is that the way you're going to do it? I'm just going half speed. Who goes, well, you have to do it. You have to do it like you're going to do it. Otherwise, I don't know where to put the camera. How do I know going to shoot the film unless you do it like you're going to do it? And that shocks a lot of people, because they look at the way that Stanley frames a scene, and he's sort of historically like this great camera operator or cameraman, still photographer, and the look of his film but he knew where he was going to put the camera till he saw the actors rehearsing and going through the motions of how they were going to play the scene.
That is one of the things that I found really interesting in going through your book too. Is you hear, you hear all the stories about how precise and exacting Kubrick is on set and everything, and listening to the book and working your way through that, it felt very collaborative. It felt like he really trusted you guys a lot to tell him sort of, how things were working from your perspective and sort of going from there, which was a little surprising based on sort of like the myth of Stanley Kubrick that I've always heard.
Yep, it's absolutely. I think it's the most shocking that directors hear when I talk experience of making the film is that he didn't place the camera until he saw a rehearsal and a performance, and sometimes if he wasn't happy with the performance, he'd say, "I don't want to shoot this today. Let's move on." In a location like this, it was easy because you say, I don't want to shoot this obstacle. Let's go shoot marching. So you'd go from shooting an obstacle to go shooting marching, because either the actor wasn't ready or he wasn't, he just wasn't seeing it in a way that was interesting and compelling. So he, in this sense, because we had such a small film unit, I would say my working with Stanley Kubrick, that he was the most independent of filmmakers I've ever worked with. We could much time and shoot as much film as we did because we had such a small crew. That we weren't paying a lot of money to film at this Bourne airfield. We built the obstacles and that was it. And we're filming in Vietnam at Becton Gas Works. He was a smart producer and he kept all of his expenses small. We didn't rent these costumes. He bought the costumes,
Yeah, and it's interesting. People might not know. You guys actually, you said it was like top to bottom 2 years that you spent filming this movie, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was in England for almost 2 years.
Yeah.
No,
that's a little long.
In those days, 3 months was a long time to make a movie. 4 months,
Right.
4 months was not unusual. That doesn't happen anymore. You get 25 days, 27 days to make a movie, and that's it.
Well, I think it ties into what you were talking about with him finding the shot on the day. Hearing you talk about making the movie in the diary, it sounded like you got the sense he was finding the movie through you guys, right? Like he was conceptual, then that was part of the delay potentially too. The reason why it did take 2 years is because he was finding the movie he wanted to tell as you all were shooting it.
That's correct.
It is interesting. I think this is one of the reasons that it is so surprising that it wasn't, storyboarded beforehand is because, again, this is like not surprising for Kubrick's movies, but it's so precise and the shots are so crisp, especially in this first half of the movie, which, it's supposed to evoke that feeling of the Marines. And so many of these shots, you are seeing the group together. You're not seeing the individual, as each character is kind of, finding that themselves. So yeah, I mean, I can, hearing you talk about it, I can understand how he did it, but goodness, to like have that kind of like loose structure on set and come away with a movie that just feels so precise and so intentional is, I think, is where you must get that shock every time you tell someone that story.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things is that, as I said when we began our talk, that this is about much more than the Vietnam War, but about what happened to people when they participate in a function like this, like the United States Marine military training. I forgot what I was going to say. Is that everything that we're trained training for that was Lee hitting me across the face.
Well, yeah, that was going to be my
That
follow-up to the slapping conversation from earlier. These wound up being accidentally real.
accidentally real, yeah. And and Stanley say, "Well, it looked like a miss. We have to do it again." I said, "Stanley, look at my face; it's all red." Yeah, I'm sorry, but it looked like it looked like he missed you. So
now
anyway,
this actually, just to get into Joker's character here, this is a big turning point for him here in the film. This is sort of a moment where he gets to kind of stand up and demand that he keep sort of part of himself. And you're talking about whether or not you believe in the Virgin Mary, and you earn a modicum of respect here from the sergeant.
Yes. Yeah.
And
what I was going to say was that all this training, is for naught once we get to Vietnam, because you're fighting against a young Vietnamese girl. You're fighting against a people that could carry a tube of rice and an AK-47, and they didn't go through all this kind of military training, and it just kind of demonstrates how antiquated this style of fighting is. It's like when you go back and look at Civil War battles or Revolutionary War battles, that how people used to march into battle, during the Roman times, and all the people on the front row of those they're just cannon fodder, right? They were the first people to get stabbed. And so all of this training that these young men are going through is inappropriate for the kind of fighting that was taking place in Vietnam.
See, as you're sort of climbing over this obstacle here, let's go back to a question here. What was the Basola, who's watching on IGN.com, wants to know, what was the most difficult scene that you were in? Was it, because there's a lot of activity, obviously physical activity, with climbing over obstacles and running through things and all that, and also a lot of intense sort of emotional scenes. There we go. So what was the most difficult scene? I guess let's just talk about the front half of this movie, the boot camp portion.
Well, the whole thing was difficult. It wasn't. You can see we never stopped running. We never stopped. And poor Vince, he blew his knee out. So most of this stuff, I can't tell if he had his knee brace on there. Because he'd gained weight to play the role. When he was running to jump over an obstacle, he blew his knee out. So a lot of those running shots and falling down and doing the obstacles, Vince had had blown his knee out and was wearing a knee brace. Obviously, we couldn't stop, and it was his first film, and so he didn't want to. He probably was terrified he was going to lose his job. So there wasn't anything easy about any of this. Whole sequence of making the boot camp. I guess there was some times where we had some laughs. We had some laughs.
That honestly would have been my guess. Is everything was tied for the hardest scene. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, in sort of touching back on sort of some of the collaborative things that I was surprised to find in the book so Vincent D'Onofrio was he your recommendation, or did you get him in the film?
Yeah, Vince and I had met auditioning for another movie, and at the Gulf and Western building, which is now a Trump International Hotel at Columbus Circle in New York City. It used to be Gulf and Western, and we had met there auditioning for a movie called Private School, a kind of tits and a teenage exploitation movie. And he was studying with somebody from Lee Strasberg's school, and I was studying with Stella Adler, and there was a great rivalry between those two teachers. And what we should do is trade places. You go to my class and I'll go to yours, and we'll decide between the two of us who's the better teacher. And some of his classes, and it was crazy because people were slapping each other and yelling at each other. And Stella Adler, my acting teacher, said that you should work from your imagination, because she'd say, a killer, are you going to go out and murder somebody? You know, like where does it end, that kind of insanity? But if you work from your imagination, you can create the most horrible killer in the history of the planet. You know, or you can make an amalgamation of, you know, you can start with Cain killing Abel, and you know, Adolf Hitler, and mix all these people together and create some kind of monster through your imagination. So when I went to his school, I was shocked that people really cause physical harm to one another. But anyway, yeah, when we were shooting Vietnam, Stanley said he was really pleased with the cast that we had. He said, I just can't find someone to play Pyle. And I said, I got somebody. He's not heavy, and he's not Southern, because Pyle was supposed to be a Southern boy, you know, like from Louisiana. And I said, but I'm sure he can do an accent and put on the weight. So he said, well, have him audition. So I got in touch with him, and he couldn't believe that. It was like, no, you don't have the part. You have to go through the process. Right. And, you know, so
just give it.
I would never, I would never, ever take credit for Vince's role in the film. All I will do is open the door. You know, I provided an opportunity, and it's the person that goes through the door that gets the job. You know, so I'm very happy to have opened the door for Vincent, and I'm really happy for him and all his success over the course of his career, and which continues to be a really exciting.
Well, it is interesting how much of Pyle and what Vincent does with the role is so physical. Like, it's all in his face, which is ironic because your performance very much, especially in the first half of the movie, is so internal, right? He is the pristine Marine, whereas Pyle's problem is he can't, and you literally just the evolution from the smile to the frown, right, says so much about that arc for these people and where this first half of the movie ultimately goes. And that really struck me, you know, rewatching it last night and rewatching it again now. You can even see it in this scene, and then we're not too far away from kind of the tragic turn for Pyle. It's really striking, especially in this first half of the film.
Yeah. He did a wonderful job.
And another cool thing about the structure of this whole sequence is the turning point here of once Joker is sort of tasked with taking care of Pyle, like the sort of paternal relationship that shifts from the sergeant, you know, over to Joker, and you know, just seeing you two interact versus, you know, Vince and Lee Ermey, like it's a really interesting contrast to be right here in the front half of this movie. And I grew up playing football in Texas, and this sequence still, like, I'd break out in a sweat seeing this happen. That whole punishing everybody else for somebody, you know, for one person slacking off, or whatever my football coach used to call it.
Yeah.
So this is another one of these iconic scenes, right? That you know, this is a scene that I think I saw it as a reference somewhere else before I saw this movie, and then seeing the movie, I'm like, that's where this came from. This soap in a towel attack that's just savage.
Yeah, they call it the Black Party. It's because even though, you know, obviously there weren't real soap bars in the towels that everybody was coming, it was still a towel knotted up to look like it had a bar of soap in it. And
Right.
I don't know how many takes we did, but I know that Vince's cries of pain here are real, and his body was completely bruised from afterward, because he you know, he gets clobbered.
Yeah, regardless of what's in those towels, like you're still getting thwapped with them just over and
Yeah.
over again.
Yeah, it's a knotted up towel, and you can see people are swinging with all they got, and
And so for you as the character here, just sort of tracking Joker's progression, like I feel like Joker is the most savage here when it comes to the Black Party.
yeah,
It feels
yeah,
like he's angry
that's
at having to be in that situation even to begin with.
it was a transition for Private Joker. That's why he has this. This is something dying here, a little bit of Joker dying.
Well, it's interesting too. I mean, the movie very much has this two-act structure to it, right? There's the boot camp, and then there's Vietnam, obviously. But the symmetry of that sequence, to jumping ahead, spoilers for people who might be watching for the first time, but the scene with the Vietnamese girl later in the movie as well, and how he responds there is, again, like having watched it last night, is really striking in that parallel between how he handles those sequences.
He being Kubrick, you mean?
And Joker, I felt.
Oh, in Joker. Yeah,
Right.
I don't know if, do we go all the way to the end of the movie with our chat?
We will,
Are
yeah.
we going to go?
Yeah, we'll get
We will.
there.
So I don't know if you want me to talk about the end of the movie before we get to the end of the movie, but
I think let's talk about the movie when we get there. I think.
okay,
I'm being bad. I'm jumping ahead.
that's all right.
I've got questions about the end of the movie. This sequence here, and again, like in thinking about the front half of this movie, the boot camp, you know, the Paris Island whole sequence, as sort of like slowly chipping away at the humanity of these recruits and the individuality and everything, and but then also as part of their training, like comparing everybody to famous assassins. Like this is like the goal here is to become as good a shooter as these notorious assassins. I thought this was such an interesting and disturbing choice here.
Well, that's the genius of Gus Hasford and his book Short Timers. I mean, that's right out of his. The irony that, you know, they're not really praising the shooters. It's that those shooters learned how to shoot that well in the United States Marine Corps. That the United States Marines creates a good product, you know,
Right.
an accurate shooter.
And this is maybe my, like, it's just so bizarre to me. This is just a bonkers scene. Singing Happy Birthday to Jesus, and then immediately being like, and then there's a magic show at 0900. It's just a fascinatingly absurd scene to me at this point in the movie.
Yeah. And Chaplin is called
There will
Charlie.
be a magic show.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the book as well. And this whole opening sequence, this first half of the movie, was expanded on, correct, from the book itself. And from what I read, the book had three sections to it, and that final portion was either changed or truncated or added to the second half of the movie. But it's really interesting because, you know, films traditionally have the 3-act structure that we're used to, and this one really does have its two halves to it. And I read that Kubrick said, he was playing around with like what we conceive to be like traditional filmmaking storytelling and trying to reinvent the way we consume, film. Did that come up? Am I paraphrasing that correctly? Did that come up at all during the filmmaking process for you?
No, I've never heard that before. The film actually has 3 acts. There's very distinct when Private Pyle shoots himself in the scene coming up. It fades to black, and the night of the Tet Offensive, the film to black. That's the end of the 2nd act, and then it becomes the 3rd act of the reuniting with Cowboy. But that said, Stanley, he thought the worst thing that happened to movies was when people started talking in them. He told me one time, because
he hates this show.
Yeah, he said when movies were silent, people were really creating a new language of visual storytelling with the motion picture camera, and films were very, with Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin, Harold instrumental, and in creating this new language of cinematography, storytelling. And he said that when people started talking in movies, they felt that they had to have like a theatrical aspect to them, like a play, of a 1st act, a 2nd act, a 3rd act. And he said that life isn't that way. We don't have 3 acts in our lives. And so you kind of look, if you look at 2001: A Space Odyssey, or Barry Lyndon, or any number of movies, there's not he's kind of always trying to erase that kind of structure of storytelling. And he was fascinated with television commercials, because he said in a commercial, you can have a guy in a 30-second television commercial going a beer out of a refrigerator in a 7-Eleven. And as he opens the door, there's 1 can of beer, and a girl reaches in and grabs beer. And he looks at her, she looks at him, and he goes, well, I'll be a gentleman, you can have the beer. And then he's walking down an aisle to get a bag of Fritos left. He's about to grab it. She grabs the bag of Fritos, and she looks at him, and he looks at her, and she goes, well, you gave me the beer, I'll give you the Fritos. Now they're standing in line to go pay for the beer and the Fritos, and they look at each other, and he's cut to the beach, and they're sharing the beer and eating Fritos. He said, so in a 30-second television commercial, you just told what would have taken in a narrative film 5 minutes or 10 minutes to tell dialogue. He said, so why can't we do that with film? Why can't we accelerate the process of storytelling so that you tell a tremendous amount of information in a very short period of time? And this whole sequence of the Vietnam thing, what minute are we on now? We're on 37 minutes?
Yeah.
Not quite to Vietnam yet.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting a tremendous amount of information in a really short period of time.
And I like
graduation days away.
A lot of the story too is being told in cutaway shots, and it's being told visually. There's a lot of obviously exposition and dialogue and things that happen, but it's largely a pretty quiet story that's being told. A lot of it through looking at how Pyle reacts to certain things, and how Joker's reacting to certain things, and so yeah, that's interesting to hear. Just the beer commercial story is great.
Yeah. So yeah, there are 3 acts though in the film. People feel that because this one is so definitive, and so such a contrast to where we're about to go that it feels like it's just two acts.
Most of you will go to Vietnam. Some of you will not come back.
Do like the this little graduation sequence here covered in all, it's kind of all of a sudden handheld camera work and like super long lenses, and it's almost like a news coverage of what's happening here. It's very sort of informal all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's like in Doctor
The slow-
Strangelove when the military base is being attacked. Stanley shot it, and it looks like documentary film from from World War II. Some of the
Yeah,
stuff that he's ever shot.
all of a sudden.
His reaction here.
You think you're some kind of fucking writer?
Sir, I wrote for my high school newspaper, sir.
Jesus H. Christ, you're not a writer. You're a killer.
A killer, yes, sir.
Gomer Pyle.
I do want to ask you too about like, and I have this question in my notes for later in the movie about Joker and just sort of how much Joker believes it when he says that he's a killer. This is one of the first things that Joker says. Is like, I joined up to kill. And there are these little moments that we keep checking back in with, is Joker a killer?
Yeah, I think that, it's difficult to go through that Marine Corps training, and I like the expression salty, that you get a little salty. You imagine through all that physical training and learning to fire the weapons and becoming something that's much bigger than you as an individual, become a part of this unit of people, that you've been part of the United States Marine Corps. That's very seductive and can change your personality. But I don't think he ever stops being the smart aleck that he is. That he and maybe this sequence right here is what brings him back into being a human being again. Is the horror of this episode right here.
It is truly terrifying too. Like this sequence is, I mean, it's supposed to be, right? It's supposed to horrify you and terrify you, but it is so tautly constructed, and it's like the thing that as you're watching this descent up until this point, you feel like is inevitable, but still are dreading, and just this entire sequence is well executed in its intent, but like just so hard to watch.
Yeah, it's a painful sequence. I'm very happy about this because they were having trouble figuring out how to blow his brains out, and I think I mentioned earlier before we started this talk that my father was a drive-in theater manager, so I've seen more movies than Quentin Tarantino. And Stanley said, what bit you ever saw in a movie, like a headshot, where somebody got shot in the head? So I said, oh, without doubt, To Live and Die in L.A. And he said, really? What happens? I said, the guy kicks the door open, and the guy puts a gun in and blows all in one shot. There's no cut. And he said, really? He said, okay. And about 2 weeks go by, and Stanley says, come here. And we go outside in the parking lot, and in the back of a cube truck, he had a 35 millimeter Steenbeck, and he had the print of Live and Die in L.A., and he had it all queued up. And he said, I know, it was in the back of a truck. The whole thing was just crazy. And he says, is this the sequence? And he showed it. I said, that's it. Isn't it amazing? He goes, okay. Now he slowed it down and he turned the sound off. And when you watch it frame by frame, you could see the person with a bucket throwing brains into, like a bunch of spaghetti and blood, fake blood, into the person's face. But with the bang, with the the explosion of the gun and the speed in which it happened, you believed that you just saw somebody get shot in the head. So using what I had showed Stanley, we were able to construct a way to blow, make it appear that Vince's head had exploded.
Yeah,
I'm not going to tell you how.
there's a great
I'll tell you how we did it.
a great section of the book that I was listening to earlier, and when I was listening to it, I went back to the movie and just sort of frame by frame, like trying to see how it worked.
Oh, yeah.
But there's also a great section in the book talking about like the squibs and the extras that sort of volunteered to test the squibs initially, which was the whole reason why you needed to.
It's a very funny sequence, isn't it? It's a funny sequence in the book because the kids that were in the movie, all the others, they call them territories, and they were just broke and they had no money. So the idea that you could put a squib, an explosive, on someone's head and give them £5, 5 British pounds, 10 pounds or 20 pounds to put explosive on the back of it, it was insane. And they hit in the head with a ball peen hammer. They got these big eggs on their head. But yeah, let's let the people watch him blow his brains out.
Yeah. Woof.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a particularly appetizing thing to go frame by frame through over and over again, but it is interesting because you can kind of see what happened there, but only if you're going through frame by frame. Like it's really
what I was always nervous about every time Vince did it was that M14 in his mouth, and at the end of it there's a little metal sight. I was always terrified he was going to pull his front teeth out or knock, when he was pulling the rifle out, that he'd pull his teeth out. They'd hit against that steel, and that's one of the great cuts ever in film history. So one of my favorite ones is in 2001: A Space Odyssey, when the early man throws the bone up in the air and it becomes a spaceship. But going from Vincent blowing his brains out to Nancy Sinatra singing "These Boots Are Made for Walking," and that young lady there, Papusu, saying she's horny, is the funniest cuts ever.
Yeah, it really is a leap from scene to scene. Yeah. Like, and you don't get any time to get your bearings. Which again, I think you mentioned it earlier. It's like the idea of not being able to sort of track where you are or have enough time to adjust to the new sort of tone and the new feel of a place. Like, that obviously everything was on purpose, but like it's a really, really fascinating technique.
And again, this is one of the first scenes that we shot when we were making the movie. And I think we were all trying to find the tone of the movie. There was a part of me that thought, maybe Stanley Kubrick's making another kind of dark comedy like Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, that movie. Right. There were aspects of the movie that were a little like Catch-22, the movie that Mike Nichols made, based on the novel. Look, this whole sequence.
Well, I think that's part of why.
Like, this is the first scene, one of the first scenes that you shot. Like, you show up to Stanley Kubrick movie. And that is. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and that wasn't scripted. Me jumping. Stanley said, "You got to do something at the end of the movie. You can't just stand there after the guy gets on the motorcycle and drives away." I said, "What do you want me to do? Like, what am I supposed to do? Go run after him?" He goes, "No, you can't run after him. He rode away on a motorcycle, but you have to do something. Do something." So I did that. I said, "Well, I'll just mimic him, And that was it. Yeah.
That actually, that hearing you say that while on the scene, you're like, is this going to be a dark comedy? Is part of what makes it such a perfect matching shot to the horror of Pyle blowing his brains out, because you're right. It is like a very comic scene, and it's a lot looser and it's a lot warmer, and you're catching up as the viewer, and you're like, where are we now? Where is Joker now, mentally and physically? You're right. It takes you on a bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah.
I will say, I think we went by it, but what is your major malfunction, numbnuts? I use still so regularly in everyday life. Like, what a perfect line.
I can't imagine you saying that, Terry.
Clint, can you?
I think I've heard it before. No, honestly, it's to break it down a little bit further. Like, it's the right amount of like it's an appropriate level of vulgarity, right? Like, it's not so inappropriate, but it's leans that direction. You can use it almost any time.
Right. Is it me so horny that has carried on? Like, what is the line that gets quoted at you the most from this movie? I know you mentioned that earlier in our conversation.
Well, actually, this one coming up, does that mean Anne Margaret's not coming? That one gets used a lot. Somebody was just talking to me about the Mickey Mouse references, and when he starts talking to me here, over my shoulder there's a Mickey Mouse doll, and I picked out, when they were showing me watches, what kind of watch I wanted to wear for the character, and there was a Mickey Mouse watch, so I wore a Mickey Mouse watch, and of course we sing Mickey Mouse at the during the end, and just before Lee Ermey got killed. There's a friend of mine from New York right there that just blew the smoke out at the end of the table. His name's Gil Coppell. He's a dear friend of mine. I got him that job. He was a waiter at the restaurant I was a chef at, and so I got him that job.
You're the job fairy in this movie. That's amazing.
Vince got his own job, though. D'Onofrio got his own job. You got this guy his job, though.
Now, over my shoulder, it's a Mickey Mouse thing, but I missed it.
So is there more to the Mickey Mouse thing, or is it just kind of a couple of coincidences about the movie?
He people are always looking for this that doesn't exist, like when Cowboy gets killed later on in this sequence in Vietnam, we carry him around a big black monolith that's on fire, and they thought, well, see, there's Mickey Mouse over my shoulder in the window. That Kubrick must have staged the scene there by this giant chunk of concrete and started it on fire, for the significance of a burning monolith. And it wasn't. It was just, there's the Mickey Mouse there over my shoulder.
You got two.
There's two of them, yeah. So it's even a double meaning.
It's a double meaning.
Yeah.
Listen, there's going to be my
point is that there was no agenda, there was no hidden significance. It was just Mickey Mouse, it was this Mickey Mouse bullshit. It was very common for people in Vietnam to reference, because they called Vietnam Disney, right? They couldn't wait to get home to the big PX. The PX is where soldiers go to buy food or things. And so America was the PX. Disney Vietnam was Disneyland.
This is an interesting scene here too. I mean, character-wise, it's just sort of the general kind of shit talking going on in the barracks, for lack of a better word. that gets kind of immediately juxtaposed with what's going to happen after this scene. But this scene in particular, with tough guys kind of trying to feel each other out, I guess a little bit, is kind of a bigger, a weightier scene in the context of the whole movie than it might seem on the surface, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Again, searching for tone. This was an early scene too, and trying to find the tone of the movie. Like what is the movie? This is my friend Gil even got a line. Stanley gave him a joke. He's coming up, my friend Gil Copel. Actually, over my shoulder is a painting of Gil. Where is he? That's Gil
Painting
on the
of
wall.
Gil or by Gil?
Yeah, that's Gil right there. He's smoking a cigarette.
That's amazing.
This is him. Oh, I thought he got a close up.
Got a laugh, too.
Hold on. I let my dog outside.
All right.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, see, this is what I really like about this scene here too. Is like there's all that just tough guys talking in the barracks, and then having to jump straight into an attack.
Right.
And I think Joker's got the line coming up here. It's just like I'm not ready for this. Like,
Yeah.
he actually explicitly says it. So like these two scenes back to back is really an interesting, a telling thing right here, because we're still barely out of boot camp as far as we're concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting the like Mickey, versus war backdrop stuff. Even if it's not intentional, I mean, we'll talk about the final scene, I'm sure, at the end in the Song of Choice. But it's easy to like read into the duality of it and like the irony of those two things together in the same way as like Joker wearing the peace sign later and the iconic Born to Kill helmet. So again, yeah, someone's gonna write a paper about the
I'm
Mickey
sure somebody
references here. If you do send it to us. Find us on Twitter. I want to read it.
At IGN.
Yeah.
I mean, that's also the wonderful kind of mystique of Stanley Kubrick films, right? Is like everything was so intentional and so so interesting to look at and watch, and so unique, and obviously he's iconic in a dozen different ways that you just have to. There's meaning in every little thing, right? And so there's that energy even when you're watching a Kubrick film that, as you're working with him, Matthew, was there that sense on the set of just like watching him work and being like, oh, this is going to be good?
Yeah, here's the end of this act. You see that? Remember, it faded to black when Vince got his brains blown out, and here comes the next one. Well, it didn't fade to black; it dissolved. Yeah.
Yeah, but
there's a couple of spots throughout the film that have that hard sort of fade to curtain down and then comes back up on the next kind of feeling.
Yeah, you'd think, but in actual fact, I mean, when you listen to the diary, I talk about that. The films that I had worked on in the past, you got a call sheet, and on the sheet, for filmmakers that are here, they know what a call sheet is. There's the work that you're expected to accomplish and complete on that day, right? You're supposed to do these things and complete the day. If you don't make the day, that's a bad thing, right? You don't make the day, that means you're going to either have to cut scenes or add time to the schedule, and time is money. So we started filming, and the call sheet on a Kubrick film was just a suggestion of what might happen. Yeah, so I started thinking, because that's what you do, it's your ego, you start thinking, it must be me. We must not be making progress because of me. I'm failing, I don't know what I'm doing. And I never took into consideration that Stanley Kubrick would be struggling to try his film, to find the truth of his film, to find the way to tell the story. And that's thing that was so beautiful to discover about Stanley Kubrick was, as I said, he created an environment for him to be able to experiment and explore the story. He said, you would never go to Picasso, because he said, you know, people always criticize me for how many takes I do. He says, who cares? Who cares how many takes I do? You would never go to Beethoven and say, hey, Ludwig, how many notes in that song? Or, hey, Van Gogh, how many strokes in your painting? You would never do that. So why do they ask an artist who makes films how many takes you do? He says it's the most stupid thing that anybody could ever ask. He goes, because you write the song, you write the concerto, you write you write it until you get it. You paint the picture until you get it right. Who cares how many strokes?
And you were saying this is the gentleman who was originally cast to be the sergeant, correct?
Yes,
gunner?
Tim Colcheri. Yeah, wonderful actor. Really, really sweet guy. Really nice man.
In terms of the number of takes, was that something, I mean, you hear, again, stories from the outside. I have not starred in any of these films, but like you hear stories of Fincher having so many takes, you know, that he does, and that part of it is like trying to break down that performative nature of like an actor and really get like the honest truth. And it seems, hearing you talking about it, but that Stanley also like really wanted to get that honesty of a performance. Did you find that like that was his purpose in the repetition and the number of takes? It sounds like kind of through your conversation and relationship with him, you guys were trying to find that honesty in a number of different ways as he was finding the movie.
Well, he said he had to do so many takes because actors didn't know their lines. And I thought, well, that's really weird. Like, what are you talking about? I know my lines. But after I finished the movie, I read a book called Society of Mind by Marvin Minsky. And Marvin Minsky, in the book, he's the person who coined the phrase, I believe it was him that coined it, artificial intelligence. And in the book, he talks about how a child discovers, you know, when you come in the world, you're lying on your back and you're looking at the world, and then you discover that your hands are attached to your body, and then you discover that your feet are attached, and then you realize that you're right, this human being.
Right.
You learn to walk and learn to eat, and you spill food all over your face and all over the floor, and then eventually you learn to put the food in your mouth and not spill it. And then as you get older, you're able to have a cup of tea on a saucer and walk across the room, stumble on the carpet, and be able to tamp the cup enough so that you don't spill the tea and drop the cup, right? But all of that is learned. It's all muscle memory and learned behavior. And when I read that, I went, that's what Stanley Kubrick was talking about, knowing your lines, talking about the act of memorization. He was talking about knowing the lines the way that I'm telling you this story now, that it's something that you've thought about, that you understand, and that you can share the story with somebody and tell the story in an articulate, colorful way. You understand what I'm saying? You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So now, I met Marvin Minsky about 20 years after I read his book. And I told him about Stanley Kubrick and the number of takes, and how when I read his book, The Society of Mind, that I feel like I finally understood what Stanley Kubrick was talking about. He goes, yes, you know, Stanley and I were very good friends. And I said, what? He goes, yeah, I worked with him on 2001: A Space Odyssey. And it was like, of course you knew Stanley Kubrick. Of course, it all made sense. Of course Stanley Kubrick would know Marvin Minsky, you know, the person who coined the term artificial intelligence. And you know, it just, because Stanley knew everybody. Stanley knew every friggin' genius on the planet.
I want to ask you about this while we're on this scene here. This is a really long walk and talk that's just kind of wrapping up here with a lot going on. There's a lot. There's a lot of really specific jargon. Oh yeah, let me ask you about the helmet real quick too. Did you have input into Born to Kill, into what was written on there, or?
Oh, that's the book. That was in Gus Hasford's book, Born to Kill.
You need to read that book.
I think the only person I can, well, there were, some of the other actors got to write what they wanted to, like Adam Baldwin put "I am become death," the famous quote that what's his name, who he took it from the famous religious book, Eastern Religion. I can't think of his name, but it was who made the atomic bomb?
Oppenheimer, I think, is said it. Or?
Oppenheimer, yeah,
Yeah.
Oppenheimer said it. I have become death after he made the atomic bomb, after they tested it, but from a famous religious text, a Tibetan. I think it's Tibetan. Yeah, but the peace sign and the Born to Kill, that's the duality of man is right out of Gus's book.
I do, and in talking about like the duality of manhood, this is another scene. Just in talking with this guy here, and like him talking about all of the horrors that he's describing, where all these dead bodies came from, and what was happening, and all that, and then just like kind of smiling for the camera also. It's a great juxtaposition of imagery here that just keeps popping up throughout this movie.
Yeah, it's again. That's why we weren't sure what the tone of the movie was. That we were trying to find it, and there's a scene coming up with Animal Mother, Adam Baldwin, and he challenges me and tries to question my manhood. And what was scripted was I took my M16 and stuck it under his chin, and I said, listen, I've got twice as many hours in country than you. If you don't leave me alone, I'll blow your brains out. Of course, I said all that with more colorful language. And we shot it. And we shot it a few times, and Stanley came over to me, said, this isn't working. Let's go to the trailer and talk. And he said, this scene coming up right now. And he said, when you were growing up in Utah, if some guy like Adam Baldwin came up to you and started challenging you, trying to make a fight with you, what would you do? And I said, a guy like Adam Baldwin, I'd make a joke. Really? A joke? That's a big, tough guy. You're not afraid of him? I said, no. The guys I'm afraid of are guys like Arliss. They played cow. It's the little dog's a big bite, right? The big guys, you punch them, and the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And really, yeah. And he said, so you'd make a joke? And I said, yeah. So we sat in the trailer drinking coffee, flipping through Gus's book, and I was desperate to get another John Wayne line in the movie, so I found that one, only after you eat the peanuts out of my shit. And so we got that one in. And, we built that scene in Stanley Kubrick's Winnebago.
Wow.
That's great. Yeah, that's another story from the book that I was really pleasantly surprised about, sort of the collaborative nature of working with Kubrick. It was pretty great. And we're getting there's somebody watching with the handle Beetlejuice X, I guess. He's in our fact checking. The book that Oppenheimer was quoting was the Bhagavad Gita. So thank you for that.
There we go. Thank you very much. Thank you, Beetlejuice.
I know. I was going to say, who's going to say it the third time?
And here's the scene with Animal Mother that you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So, see, it's turned into a smart aleck, a private Joker scene, instead of me getting in a fight with.
Yeah, and it makes so much. It makes a bunch of sense with the character too, which is cool. Would have been strange.
Knowing that you shot this portion first, did the smart alecky response inform any of the boot camp kind of smart alecky? How many times can I keep saying smart aleck? But any of that kind of like sassy nature of Joker there, or was that always kind of the intent for him from the start?
Yeah, I mean, this is the guy who says in the first line in boot camp, he says, "Is that you, John Wayne? Is this?" So that's the same kind of guy, the same,
Yeah.
and before he gets boot camp beats the shit out of him.
Yeah.
The interesting thing for me is I always wondered when we were shooting this, had Private Pyle not blown his brains out in the bathroom, is that who he would become? Would he have become Animal Mother in Vietnam?
Yeah.
They're kind of the same character, that there's something dead and there's something that's so broken.
Yeah, absolutely.
And another pop music track playing over the course of this scene too, which I know obviously you guys didn't have the soundtrack figured out when you were filming and finding the tone of the movie, but all of the soundtrack, and I find it really fascinating. And it's another one of these like really like they don't quite fit in a perfect way, right?
Yeah, there was at one point Kubrick wanted to have all Rolling Stone songs, and I think that one, Painted Black, but it was like the whole soundtrack was Rolling Stones, and then they just wanted so much money for the music library, and it's kind of Stanley called Mick Jagger and said, I really love your music and I wanted to have it all in the film, but they're charging so much money for it. And the story is that Mick said to him, I'm sorry, I don't control my library. I don't put the prices on it. I could try to talk somebody into it, but those are the prices, Stanley. And Stanley got angry at him and said, I really like your early music. The early music was good. And Mick Jagger said the same thing to him. He said, "Yeah, I liked your early movies too." and that was
the idea of Mick Jagger and Stanley Kubrick just throwing shade at each other is
right.
It's just great.
This is
I like
this
early
now
stuff.
is what I think this is the first sequence that we shot in the film, and it's one of the best directions that I ever received. Stanley came over and said, "Act scared." That's very specific.
Yeah.
Now, if you appreciate that kind of direction, because it's very specific. Everybody might act differently, act scared differently. Some people might shake and make their eyes big, like cowboy looking there. But it's very specific direction. And, there was never any kind of psychological direction or philosophical converse that we had about Private Joker, how I should play it or how I should act scared. But I love that kind of direction.
Well, because you know what that means for you, right? But each person, as you said, has
Look,
that different version.
We're all acting scared. I could hear him saying it to each person. Act scared, act scared.
There's another part of the book that I want to, especially as we're getting into the combat section of the movie here. But we're getting a few questions from the fans that are along similar lines. Logan Cifelli, for one, who's watching on Cinefix, is asking about if shooting the movie affected you in any ways, similar to your character's sort of arc. Did you feel, did it hang with you after filming? And did your experience affect you in any way similar to how it affected Joker. And one of the interesting, that question reminds me of one of the passages in the book where you talk about, filming these Vietnam portions and then Stanley's process, the feeling that it had. I think you referred to it as it's altering us. Like there's a feeling with the actors that it was sort of weirdly changing you guys.
Yeah, it definitely did. Obviously, people sometimes they refer to filmmaking or sporting events as war, and of course it's a gross exaggeration to compare any aspect of filmmaking or sports to young men and women are forced to go through when they go into a combat situation. Those are real, life-altering situations that they're put in. So I want to give anything that I say with that caveat. After I finished this film, plus the mission of making the film, almost 2 years, I didn't realize how much it impacted my life until I got back to New York City, and it was as you say, it altered me. It altered me for a long time.
Was it in the sense that being there and in that character for 2 solid years, or just the subject matter that you were dealing with, or is it the work that you were doing, to portray Joker, or just the sum total of all of it?
I think the sum total, yeah. I mean, this place that we were filming is a place called Beckton Gas Works. It was one of the most polluted places that I've ever been. The soil was dyed blue from the chemicals that they use. It was an energy plant. They took coal and turned it into something called coke, and all of the byproducts of the manufacturing, about 27 carcinogens in the soil and in the air. And we were young, we didn't think about it. We'd have a cup of tea and a truck would drive by, one of the film trucks would drive by, and all the dust would come down on the donut you were eating, or the tea or the coffee you were drinking, and you just drank it, you just ate it. And so I think for a long time, I think a lot of us were really sick after having worked, physically sick. And then, I'd have to go lie down on a psychiatrist's couch to be able to get to the foundation of the feelings that I finished making the movie.
Yeah.
Well, I am curious. I don't know if you remember, but hearing you talk about experiencing finding the tone on set, do you remember what your reaction was, or I don't know if there was anything that surprised you when you did finally see the finished film for the first time?
It was weird, It was weird. It was a very weird experience watching the movie. I watched it on 3rd Avenue across from Bloomingdale's. They had a small premiere of the movie at I remember the name of that theater, about, was it 9th Street on 3rd Avenue in New York City. And I remember that there was a big fight between Siskel and Ebert about the movie.
Read about that.
Gene Siskel really loved it, and Ebert, while he thought it was a good movie, he was comparing it to Stanley's previous films, and which caused a big fight between the two of them, because it was like, you don't judge a person's present work based on their past. You're reviewing this movie, not the person's career, and they had a big fight about it. And I thought that Roger Ebert was a Rick. You know, when you listen to him talk about it, it's really stupid. It's a really bad argument that you know, his criticism, his film criticism, is really bad. And I remember just really loving that Siskel was so smart about his attack and his defense of the film and Kubrick and what the boot camp is and what the boot camp does and what this experience of fighting in Vietnam was for a generation of young men and women.
Yeah, I read that there was, in addition to that, there was some, I don't remember what it was now, but there was some other movie that Ebert rated higher at the time that was like a bad kids movie or something, and then Gene Siskel would not let him live it down. I'll have to look up what that was. But I did read that at the time there was like kind of a lack of critical consensus about what the movie was trying to say at the end, which is interesting because it has become one of these iconic war or war movies, but also one of these iconic films exploring humanity that, I mean, I get it. You walk it out of a movie and you got to process it for a while. And in this case, decades, but it's interesting to hear that there was kind of that division around, how people interpreted the ending.
Well, yeah, just to go back to what I talked about before about the people walking out of seeing 2001: A Space Odyssey in New York at the premiere, and the
Right.
dismissal of Barry Lyndon, the dismissal of The Shining. Yes, it's weird that 35 years after having made this film, that it's still a discussion, that there's still this is still part of the conversation. This film that just doesn't happen. I mean, think of some really amazing movies that came out. Do you want to watch? I don't know, Memento, Christopher Nolan's movie Memento. Once you know what Memento is about, do you go back and would you go back and watch Memento? I'm not dissing Christopher Nolan.
Right.
I'm
maybe like once just to see it again through that context. But yeah, you're right. It's like, what's the repeat value you get out of it? And I think Kubrick's movies have stood the test of time because there is so much, like you were saying, like when you this idea that when you go see an opera, you can't see it again twice because there's nothing more you get out of it, or you can't hear a second amazing piece of music, a composition, a second time, like you wouldn't get more out of it. Like every time I revisit one of his movies, no matter how many times I've seen it, you get something new, some new fresh perspective or some new clever shot recognition or something that he did in terms of how he put the movie together. I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think of in Dr. Strangelove, Peter Sellers is so amazing as Strangelove and in the War Room, but then you go back and you watch the movie again and you go, oh my God, George C. Scott.
He's hilarious in that movie.
Start watching the actor who played the Russian in the room and how brilliant he is, and his expressions and his moments. It's just fantastic. And then you go back, you start watching Sterling Hayden and how amazing Sterling Hayden is as not as Strangelove. What's his name? The guy, the Precious Bodily Fluids guy.
No, not General Turgison either, because that's George C. Scott.
Jack the Ripper?
Jack Ripper. Jack D. Ripper, yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, the other fascinating thing too, and I really felt it more rewatching Full Metal Jacket this week, is at different points in your life too. I feel like these movies start to mean different things. Because when I first started to watch Kubrick's films, when I was younger, and then now 25 years later, watching Full Metal Jacket again, like it's a different film, and it hits me in a different way. Like obviously because it's been a long time since I first saw it, but to have something there and to have a different way to interpret things, I think is one of the kind of most underrated things about Stanley Kubrick, probably.
Yes.
Here's another moment here where Joker mentions he wants to be the first kid on his block with a confirmed kill. And the note that I wrote on that one is like, really? Like, does he?
Oh,
Like, because
No,
that's the
he's-
funny thing. Yeah, he's Joker. He's joking.
he's Joker. Yeah, he's totally joking. This is a big sequence in my diary. This whole motorbike scene, because this was, it felt like this was a month of filming, just this right here.
Really?
Yeah, if you go back and listen to this sequence, it goes on and on and on. And we all got on each other's nerves. We were all hating each other. Stanley was hating everybody. You know, everybody was just hating each other. Yeah.
At what point in the filming process was this scene? Was this another one that was towards the beginning and having a hard time feeling out tone?
I think here we're about 3 months into filming. We're about 3 months into filming. And yeah, it was, I mean, it's so simple, this sequence right here. We were there ever. The sky would change, it would get cold. It's supposed to be Vietnam, and we're all dressed in inappropriate clothes, especially that young girl in a that t-shirt she's wearing. It was freezing. It was winter time, and yeah, we were just all on each other's asses during this whole sequence here. And
Well,
whenever
it seems too where,
whenever we'd say cut and the sky would change, the sky would go black or it was inappropriate, they would their cards out and start playing hearts. Everybody was playing hearts, and we were all supposed to be eating in the scenes. And there was only one. We were eating real sea rations from the Vietnam War, and the sea rations were horrible. So there would be fights for fruit, like pears or peaches or fruit cocktail. People would get in fights over fruit cocktail. Everybody wanted that, since we had to eat in the scene.
Was it one of those scenes too where because it's a pretty simple on paper scene, it's more frustrating because like this should be easier. Like we should be through this by now.
Yeah,
just made it even more frustrating.
Totally. Yeah. Wow. This is, we're looking at the 4K, right?
Yeah.
This
believe
this
so,
is
right?
amazing. I mean, this is so much. I mean, the detail in the background is stuff that you could never see on the 35 mil. If this were a 35 millimeter print and we were sitting in a theater, all that stuff in the background would just be kind of blurry detail, blurry background.
Right.
It's incredible what the 4K restoration is able to capture.
Yeah, this
That's
was the
amazing.
version that I watched to prep for this, and to get you hyped for the ending. If you're excited about like the depth that you're able to see here, that really translates in that final sequence too, which is pretty incredible.
Booby trapped.
He's leaning down to pick up a stuffed animal.
Yeah. The Vietnamese knew the Americans were suckers for stuffed animals.
They're like, we saw your Snoopy, we saw your Mickey Mouse, we know.
Yeah.
And here comes another moment too of we keep talking about the Born to Kill and the peace sign and the all the juxtapositions and the duality of man. And this sequence coming up here too, where Cowboy finds out that he's now squad leader, and Joker's there with the grin, like, "Hey, congratulations, man!" Like congratulating him on the promotion.
By the way, sorry to interrupt. The voice on the
no.
other end of the radio. Sorry, that's Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good to know.
He's like, we don't need a cast for that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I had no idea.
Yeah, that's Stanley's voice.
Roger.
That's him.
Out.
Also in Lolita, Peter Sellers is also in Lolita, and you know, he's British, and Stanley, as I mentioned before, he's from the Bronx, and so Peter Sellers dressed and imitated Stanley Kubrick as in Lolita, as because he's playing a director. So Peter Sellers said, "Well, I'm just going to play you." So if you ever wondered what what a young Stanley Kubrick was like, just watch Lolita, and you can watch Peter Sellers and see him acting like Stanley.
That's great.
It's really funny knowing Stanley. I mean, look at the detail in that smoke. This 4K restoration, it's incredible. The buildings and stuff. Because we were shooting pretty slow stock film. I think we were shooting sometimes 60, 100, and 60, 100 ASA, 200. But you know, it's pretty slow film, and so the detail that film stock is able to capture, it's on the negative, and so this 4K restoration is able to go in and capture all that beautiful detail.
Yeah, you can see it all in the smoke right behind it. That's amazing.
This sequence right here, this is definitely 1 month. So from the I come up here and I say, "What's the matter? Are we lost?" This whole sequence, this was called The Wall. What are we shooting tomorrow? We're shooting The Wall.
Still shooting The Wall.
Yeah.
What was it that had you guys? Yeah.
Tell me. I know that one of the reasons was because he wanted to put bullet hits in the wall in that building, right in the center of the frame. Blow the wall up, and they'd say, put the bullets, reload the wall, and they would put bullet hits in the wall again. We did that 3 or 4 times. So this whole sequence, yeah. This is a month of my life at this wall.
This is crouching right there.
Yeah. I mean, it's extraordinary to think when you listen to the simplicity of it, and you're going to say, "I took a." It was freezing cold. Sometimes you can see breath coming out of people's mouths. You can see it's cold. It's England. It's cold, and so we ran those heaters that look like jet engines. We parked them really far away where we wouldn't hear them making noise, and brought the foil aluminum ductwork on those expanding, kind of blowing in people's faces. But what we think about was that when it was blowing in your face, it was blowing carbon monoxide. So that. Yeah,
you're like in a polluted area, breathing carbon monoxide, freezing in weather inappropriate clothes.
Exactly.
In the most polluted place.
We wondered why people were losing their voice. Yeah, we wondered why people were losing voices.
Because it's like Vietnam shouldn't be pleasant.
Yeah, and here's the note that I have for this scene is just in thinking about the reaction to this gunfire and just the frankly obscene amount of firepower that they put into these buildings without ever seeing what they're shooting at. I can see how doing this 2 or 3 times would take a month.
Yeah.
Especially, if you need to. Was it that?
I mean, this is what I was. This is what. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to ask, when you were talking about the bullet-ridden wall, was it that close-up that we saw that they just basically had to reset it every time you filmed it?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Makes sense now.
This is what I was talking about. That all of the training that the Marines were going through, all of that military might, huge military industrial complex that the United States has. Look at all these guys, all that firepower, and it's one well-trained, well-disciplined Vietnam.
Yeah.
You know, you can't win a war against a young girl who's really motivated and willing to, eat bugs and rice. Where the Marines, they're all those bullets and canteen. The Vietnamese said they could tell. I think it's in Gus Hasford's book that when the Americans were arriving, they could smell them like a mile away. They smelled like pigs. They said.
Well, it's
Literally,
interesting to see.
like they.
These squibs that he's getting hit with are so brutal.
Yeah.
I don't
This
know
is a
if
good
it's just,
sequence in my book too.
I don't know if it's just me having, I don't know, maybe I'm interpreting wrong, but I feel like this sequence has like a dark sense of humor to it as well, because it's so over the top what they're doing, and like they're trying to go and they're trying to save, one of their team members, and they go and then they still get hit. Like, I don't know, like you're watching it and it's horrifying. And again, like the reveal, the irony of it just being, as you said, one very motivated, very well-trained Vietnamese girl after all this buildup. Like this does feel more comic than not, like in that sequence as well, as messed up as it is. It's just like the irony of them not being prepared after, an hour and a half of preparation.
Yeah, tragic comedy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's an absurdity to it, and sort of a level of that definition of insane, of doing the same thing twice, kind of energy to it. The other thing that I find really interesting about the scene is we talk about how the training, like the nuts and bolts training that they got, obviously is failing them here, but this is just kind of another sort of test of like what humanity they have left in them, right? Like their buddies are out there getting shot and they know they have to do something, but all like logically they need to go somewhere else or go about it a different way. So like in a way, this scene is where the movie starts to come full circle for me, from everything that they went through at boot camp, and sort of like chipping away at sort of their humanity and their identity, and all of that sort of coming into play from this point through the end of the movie. I think this is one of the interesting things that I got out of it in my rewatch this week that I had never really thought about before.
A month at that wall.
A month.
It makes sense with that context. Watching through it again, I'm like, oh yes, I can understand now.
The brilliant things that Stanley had to discover was, obviously we're in a combat situation where there were times when nothing was happening. The threat, even though it's not close to them. And he said it was when he was watching the news in Beirut during the Israeli Beirut war, that the reporters could comment on the battle that was, in the distance, and they could report and speak without danger because they knew how far away the gunfire was. Right? You understand what I'm saying? That it was, the gun was at a subsistence that you could hear it, but it wasn't a threat to you, to the reporter who was speaking. So when he was doing the sound mix on the film, that where there were places, when you're doing a sound mix, this is for the directors or the sound mixers that are listening to this conversation right now, that by putting gunfire in the distance, you could maintain threat audience that was watching without having to show it, without having to demonstrate, to show the audience, but it was distant gunfire that was an imminent threat.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And it's that type of thing
It was
that like
really brilliant of him. Yeah.
yeah, that you don't maybe initially pick up on when you watch it too, as it maintains that kind of tense nature, but even in the quieter sequences, as you're saying.
Yeah. A month at that wall.
Still at that wall. I will
mean,
say it is like it's been a month since we started talking about the you spent a month at that wall. Like this is a much longer sequence now that I'm living in it with you than I remembered.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a
It
kind
is
of
a
an
long
interesting
sequence.
thing. It's a long sequence,
Yeah.
and it's a tough decision for everybody to make in here. And like it wants to be a slog of a sequence, right? Like this is a tough spot for them.
Yeah. And all of that stuff. There's nothing. Those are buildings that they blew up. This was a abandoned gasworks that was a major target during the Second World War. The Nazis were trying to take out because it was a energy source. A gasworks. So this was a big target during the Second World War, and it was also so it became our playground to make this Vietnam War. So all that concrete, all the wires, broken glass. There's nothing friendly or sharp, nothing film friendly about working at that particular location.
Yeah.
It was all ugly and dangerous. This is
Well,
a
it's
great
interesting
shot.
again. Oh yeah, this is like all our gamers in the watching who have like spent too many hours playing a Call of Duty or something. You see that, you're out in the open. You want to yell it to him right before
Yeah.
the moment
Yeah.
happens, and
Yeah. I mean, his dog tags fell perfectly on the squib, and when it exploded, they came up and slapped him in the face. And it's all really good. See, there's the burning
That's right.
monolith.
We have the shot.
Yeah.
Just a coincidence. Nothing significant.
Just nothing to see here.
Yeah.
I
I
feel
mean,
like
I
of
guess
all
it is kind of.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I mean, I guess it is just a concrete thing. It's black and it's like a monolith and it's on fire. So,
I feel like of
people
all
that go
directors to place Easter eggs of their former movies in their current movies, Stanley Kubrick is not that director.
Right.
Yeah.
Mickey Mouse, though.
Yeah,
All
Mickey
over them.
Mouse.
As far as death scenes go, this is a really impactful death scene. This
Yeah.
is cowboy
It's
getting wasted here is a tough. This is a tough scene. This one is really, really good.
Yeah. This is.
I'm cutting out to this wide shot to just sort of quietly look at it from a distance for a minute.
We've been talking a lot about your diary. Obviously, the book is amazing, but I think what you also talk about a lot in it is that it's amazing that you even were able to make it. That Stanley was so notoriously tight with his sets, but that you were able to say like, "Hey, I'm playing a journalist. Like, it's important for you to journal," and then getting the permission to be able to take the photos was kind of unheard of, and to be able to like have that lens back. Are you showing us one now? Is that this?
I'm trying to show you. Where is it? Where is it? There it is. You see,
Yeah.
that's the back of Stanley's. It's the back of Stanley's head. That shot. Yeah, that's Adam Baldwin's head there. You can see it. I don't know where they. Anyway, yeah, that was the. I got that medium format Rolleiflex camera and I took pictures on the set, and it's one of my favorite pictures. I mean, it's just the back of Stanley's head, but it's, I guess, because you can imagine what's going on inside of it.
Right.
Right. Now this sequence here, like running through the smoke, and as the sun is going down and into all these flames, and it's just orange, and it has this energy of you guys are going into hell at this point, which is just, this is another spot in the movie where it leans really visual, really fast. Like, so on the on the day while you guys were filming it, was it, how much of the visuals did Stanley talk about with you guys?
Not really any. This is where we're gonna shoot this sequence, and you're gonna go into the building. We went from an exterior location shot to, this is one of the only things that we shot on a stage. We shot at Pinewood Studios. And so all that crap from Beckton Gasworks got scooped up and dumped on the floor in here, which was really bad, because it was one thing to breathe the dust in the open air, but now we were on a closed stage with fires burning, and there was somebody, a fire marshal up on the roof, on the ceiling of the building. When it got like 115 or something upstairs, they had to shut everything down, and because they were frightened the ceiling was going to start on fire. And this is where I lost the hearing in my left ear. So this was my idea. I told Stanley, I said, my gun should jam, because the M16s were notorious for jamming. And he said, I love it, because he could do all this right here.
Right.
So in that column, the bullet hits they put in the wall, one of them exploded in. My head got too close. That's me holding my head going, fuck, I just lost the hearing in my left ear. And
now, there's one thing that I wanted to ask you about from that reading in your book. I thought was really cool. Was there's the original ending in the script was different than this, right? And that was something that you and in the diary, that's something that Kubrick kind of checks in with you about over the course of the filming. Like, have you given any more thought to the ending? And is something that he asked you a couple of times in the diary. But like, what was the evolution
he asked me. Well, Joker died in the Mickey Mouse. When we were singing Mickey Mouse, that place was supposed to, like, bombs start dropping and things are exploding, and the voiceover said something like, your feet tell your brain or tell your mind to pick your body up and to run from these bombs that are pursuing you. And then it goes into my thoughts drift back to Mary Jane Rottencrotch and the Great Homecoming Fuck Fantasy. And so I told Stanley, he kept asking me about the end of the movie, and I said, it shows the tragedy of war. It shows the waste, all this, the loss of humanity, these young people's lives that are destroyed with post-traumatic stress, or they get killed, or they lose arms, they lose their limbs. They never come home. And I said, but he dies. And he said, well, keep thinking about it. And we got in a big fight about it. And I'm trying to condense the story really quickly. But one day I told Stanley, he said, have you been thinking about the movie? And I was really angry with him, because he kept asking me for months now, over and over. And I said, he should live. And he goes, what do you mean he should live? I said, he should go to boot camp and have his drill instructor get shot and killed in a latrine. He should go to boot camp and have the guy that he's trying to help get through boot camp stick an M14 in his mouth and blow his brains out. He should go to Vietnam, and the one guy that he knows from boot camp should die in his arms. He should go to Vietnam, and he should live, Stanley. He should stand over a young Vietnamese girl and have to take her life because she's begging him to put her out of misery. He should live, Stanley, because that's the real horror and the real tragedy of war, is having to spend the rest of your life having experienced the things that Private Joker experienced. And Stanley said, that's the end of the picture. And so what I wanted to accomplish in this scene, I wanted to splash blood on the audience. I wanted them to feel the responsibility of every soldier and every Marine and every Air Force and Navy person who goes to fight wars and has this kind of life-altering experience. I wanted them to feel the responsibility of what happens when we send young people to war. And I wanted to splash blood on the audience. And I wanted the audience to see Joker die in front of them. Even though he wasn't going to physically die, he was going to spiritually die in this moment.
It's one of the things I wanted to ask you about is this last close-up of Joker where he's making the decision. Just wanted to ask you about, like, talk about the process of that and what's going. You might have just explained all of it just then, but it's just such a great performance in this tight close-up right before you pull the trigger.
Yeah. I asked him, did you do something? Did you slow it down? Did you alter it? And he said, no, man, that's all you. Because it is a surreal kind of close-up. The thing that people always point out is that the peace sign disappears in this next sequence. I've never paid attention to it, but I'm going to pay attention to it now. Is that, you know, the born to kill, the duality that they said in this moment, the peace sign disappears. I'm going to watch now and see if it really does.
It's right there.
I just want to say also that Vivian Kubrick, under the pseudonym Abigail Mead, did the music for this. And it's stunning. Stanley Kubrick's daughter, Vivian. And she's brilliant. And she did an amazing job with the music here.
Yeah, it's a really great minimal kind of score.
Well, it's so taut, right? The whole movie, Joker is talking about he wants to be a killer. He has Born to Kill on his
Oh, there it
helmet.
goes. It's starting to disappear. There it goes.
Just sort of a quirk of the shadows there in your wardrobe.
Yeah.
I think I wonder if that's because it's happening like as you're raising the arm, your other collar is going over it. It looks sort of turning your shoulders a little bit. Totally on purpose, right?
Yeah, I did it. I knew I had to turn a quarter of a turn.
Someone's slowly moving the scarf.
That was another month of the shooting, was getting that right.
So you often hear about people getting the 1,000-yard stare, and they talked about it just the night of the Tet Offensive, and this is the 1,000-yard stare. I think we accomplished it.
The cutaways to the guys in the group too, as Joker is coming to that decision, there, like, they've all got it also. You know, that the thing that everybody's talking about, the stare that you get when you've been in combat, like, they've already got it watching Joker, earn his, I guess.
Yeah.
And holding that shot on your face like that, like, and especially given the context of what you were hoping to accomplish, it holds the audience accountable. Like, it's unflinching. It doesn't let you look away as Joker is, judging himself and judging everything that got him to that place. What do you think about the sequence now, seeing it remastered in all its glory?
Oh, it's amazing how the detail that you can see in those buildings. This is another thing that I was really happy about, that it gotten so dark and we weren't able to get a stop with the cameras. And Stanley was saying more fire. And I said, put more smoke. He goes, what are you talking about? It'll block the fire. And I said, no, it'll refract. The smoke will be like a jump board. It'll make more light. It'll, bounce the light around. And Stanley looked at me, pulled on his beard, and then he started screaming at the visual effects people. The special effects guys, more smoke, more smoke. So, they're technical contributions I made to the film that I'm very proud of. That's one of them.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, just that weird sort of blanket of orange that's happening there in the background is so spooky. It's silhouetted up against it here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we never asked permission. We never asked permission to sing Mickey Mouse. Did it, So to all the producers that are watching, that may be watching right now, because you'd say, well, you have to get permission from Disney to sing it. And of course, but, you know, I think that I always imagined all the executives at Disney going like, did Kubrick ask you? Did he give you permission? Did he give you permission? Did he give you permission?
Yeah.
He didn't ask me.
Everybody just looking around the room is like, which one of you told Kubrick he could do that? Like,
Yeah. I've been waiting all movie to ask though, and especially in the context that you guys changed the ending. Like, talk us through the decision to ultimately end on that haunting sequence as everyone is singing Mickey Mouse.
Well, I think it's the difference between Stanley Kubrick and someone like Steven Spielberg, who's, you know, obviously a legendary film director. That Steven would have had the ending with Joker dying, and didn't just end there. It had something that subsequently, I don't know how many years later, in Saving Private Ryan, with them standing in the graveyard, with Joker's father talking about his son's life. It was very similar to the ending of Private Ryan. But that's the difference between Stanley Kubrick and Steven Spielberg. You know, that Steven likes a central, you know, heart tugging kind of narrative, and Stanley is somebody. I often think about it as, you know, that Hollywood make things pretty, right? We put makeup, we put nice light, we put nice costumes. The boy meets the girl, the boy loses the girl, the boy gets the girl back, and it has a happy ending. Something terrible happens, and people die, and they go to heaven. You know, but in reality, we don't know what happens. You know, life is a great mystery. But what we do know is that human beings are capable of unbelievable cruelty, that there is no limit to the cruelty that human beings are capable of. So what I believe, look at all of Stanley's films and take moments from them and try commonality between them. That if you take 2001: A Space Odyssey, where the early man finds a bone and learns to take that bone and beat
he takes the bone and he beats.
It got stuck for a second.
Yeah, you froze a little bit. Are you back?
Oh, yeah, I'm here. No, am I frozen?
It was perfect.
I think
though.
it was
It was
just,
right
it was
when
just
you
such
went.
great punctuation that it paused the whole stream.
Yeah. So he punches and breaks that guy's skull open. Or that as long as we use violence to solve our problems, that we are never going to evolve as a culture, as humanity, of creating a civilization where we solve problems peacefully. That Full Metal Jacket is a great example of the ignorance of civilization and man at this stage of our evolution. That we haven't moved away from that early man who took a bone and beat somebody's head in. And if we don't learn to solve our problems in peaceful fashions, that we'll all be like Slim and Dr. Strangelove, climbing on a nuclear bomb and riding it down to the earth and setting off a nuclear holocaust.
Right.
That Stanley Kubrick, looking at humanity and civilization in the mirror and seeing the pimples and the warts and the bumps and the ugliness that exists, and saying, this is who we are. If we don't learn to be better, we're in big trouble.
I think it's why they stand the test of time, right? Because at its core, that question is timeless. And yes, you can have a movie set in Vietnam and, you know, filmed many, many moons ago, but still feels so relevant and timely to us today if you're, you know, experiencing it for the first time.
Yes.
So what'd you think?
Matthew,
You haven't watched it in a while. I know we talked over the entire thing. We went through the whole movie. I know you said you haven't had a chance to do it, and obviously we talked over the bulk of the dialogue, and we're live commentating. But what do you think
Yeah.
revisiting it again?
Well, we talked a lot, so I didn't really watch the movie, but it's so weird to watch yourself getting old. That I'm not really a different person, obviously, than I was when I was 24, 25 years old making the movie. But my son was born on the movie. Chernobyl happened while we were making the movie. My father had a heart attack. My manager died of AIDS. It was, so there's the movie that was happening, all this world of things that were happening outside of that world that we're waiting. And, I'm still the curious young man that I was, made the film. I'm still searching. I still believe that my best work is ahead of me. Even with the success that you have, you still are constantly trying to remain a part of the conversation. A friend of mine told me that a few years ago, he told me this story about Warren Beatty. He was talking to somebody's, my friend's, his wife is a casting director. And at the end of the conversation, he said, "What are you working on?" And she told him about this movie she was making. And Warren Beatty said, "Is there anything in it for me?" And, that it's funny to think of somebody as successful and, amazing as Warren Beatty, who's made some amazing movies. Reds, I think, has got to be considered one of the best movies ever made. It's extraordinary. And I mean, then his acting performances in Bonnie and Clyde, and I mean, he's amazing. So that, we're always looking for opportunities. We can be working on something, and as soon as you finish, you think, "Oh my God, I'm never going to work again." Yeah.
Well, if you don't mind, we've got a couple other questions that we can that came in while we were watching the movie. If you can hang out for another couple of minutes here.
Okay.
We talked a little bit about this during the movie. Touched on some things, but Rio Miller, who's watching on Cinefix, wants to know, what did you learn to be the most valuable aspect of a good director-actor collaboration in your time with Stanley Kubrick?
Well, we talked a little bit about it. I think that Stanley had obviously read books about acting and tried to understand them. I think that it was confusing to him that somebody could be, like Jack Nicholson in The Shining, swinging an axe and crazy, and then he'd say cut, and suddenly that person wouldn't be that person. That he was Jack Nicholson, and that it was weird for him how somebody can step into a character and be something so crazy and dangerous and then be normal. But I think it fascinated him, and I think he had great respect for actors. But as I say, we never had philosophical conversations about Joker. It was he said 90% in a movie is casting the right actor. Finding somebody who understands the character, who is physically appropriate, who is mentally right, for that role. There was a moment when he wanted to cast a bunch of 18-year-olds to be in the movie, which would have been amazing. And there was a moment when Private Joker was going to be played by Anthony Michael Hall.
Wow.
It didn't work out, but I think that would be amazing to see a film like Full Metal Jacket with a bunch of 18-year-olds. I mean, right. When I was 18 years old, I didn't know anything. So to put a real 18-year-old through that kind of boot camp, the manipulation, the mind manipulation to an 18-year-old boy or girl. I mean, it would be extraordinary to see that.
Yeah.
Right.
And it sounds like
Thinking
trust-
about the dynamic between. Go ahead, Terry.
Oh, I was just going to say, it sounds like trust is what you're talking about too. Like if 90% of it is casting the right person, it's also trusting that person to fulfill
Yeah.
your vision. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple people that have asked too that are curious to know. The Cali Kid, who's watching on IGN, is one of them. Wants to know if you stayed in touch with Stanley after the film. Did you
Yeah.
keep up with him?
We remained friends until he started making Eyes Wide Shut. And then, having spent 2 years with him, I knew that once he started another production, there wasn't to be time for hanging out and chit-chatting over the telephone. But when I would go to England, I, go to visit. And but once he started Eyes Wide Shut, that was really the end of it. And of course, he died end of Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah.
Another question, folks wanted to know. There's been a handful of questions about this is kind of off topic here, but about Vision Quest. There's Alex Crocco who's watching on Cinefix. Super Kong on IGN.com has also said this isn't so much of a question, just a comment that I've seen a couple of times. But Super Kong says, "I love Matthew Modine." Great. I'm 45, so I was a kid when Vision Quest came out. I always thought he was a fantastic actor. I'm not saying much because I'm also watching, but this is a cool feature. So thank you, Super Kong, for that. Alex Crocco had asked just what it was like in general working on the film Vision Quest. So we've got some Vision Quest fans watching the stream tonight.
Vision Quest is standing the time. Vision Quest is a really good movie. It's it's one of those movies they keep talking about remaking, and you really can't. The things that Loudon Swain says and does in the film are so political in 2020 that there's been some sports now, people on the radio and stuff that go back and review movies and analyze and have talks like we're having this evening. And they say that if Swain was around today, he's in prison, for the things that he says and does in the movie. But it's extreme. But it was a different time. It'll be interesting to see how it ages another 20 years. For people to go back and look at it. I remember watching Blazing Saddles, which was a movie when I was 10 or 11 years old when it came out. I just thought that was the funniest movie. It was so, dangerous. It's a Mel Brooks movie, and they use the N-word in the movie, and Alex Garris, a football player, punches a horse, and then of course they're all sitting around the campfire eating beans and farting, and it was just so funny. And I showed the movie to my son when he was a similar age. He went, "This is not funny. This is really, really wrong. You don't say that word. You don't punch horses. You don't knock horses out. That's not funny." And of course, seeing it through somebody's today, there's nothing funny about the movie at all. But Vision Quest stands the test of time. Vision Quest is a really good movie. I love it.
That's what we're getting back to. Well, Matthew, thank you again so much for being here. I really enjoyed the conversation and enjoyed watching Full Metal Jacket with you. So thank you again for being here, man.
Yeah,
those are
was
my
a dream.
paintings in the background. Those are my paintings.
Oh, nice.
You see them?
They're amazing.
Yeah.
I know
They're
we've gotten
great.
a whole tour throughout this.
Yeah.
Yeah, between the paintings and that the photo. But again, thank you very much,
That's-
Matthew. And
and-
thank you again to. Oh no, go ahead.
That's Anderson Cooper's mom in the middle.
Oh,
Really?
Yeah, it was.
I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna maximize it on my screen after because I can't
Yeah.
see super close.
And-
They're amazing.
Yeah, Gloria Vanderbilt. It was a photograph that was taken by Arthur Miller's wife, and I copied the photograph and painted it.
Wow.
Anyhow, That's enough about
No,
that.
No, and I
Enough.
love that you still have the photos framed from it. This is like such a, I know Clint is trying to wrap us up, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Did you keep anything like beyond the photographs, obviously, that have stayed with you? Like, do you have the helmet? Like, have you kept any of that kind of like iconic stuff from set, or tried to find it after all these years?
The helmet is in the Kubrick exhibit. My Mickey Mouse
Right.
watch is in the Kubrick exhibit, and I had 3 pairs of the glasses, those wire rim glasses, and I gave them one of the pairs. But I have a Mickey Mouse watch and my wire rim glasses. I have 2 pairs of those. My glasses and my
Good. That's
Mickey
what I was
Mouse
hoping it
watch.
was. That
Yeah.
Kubrick exhibit, by the way,
the
a couple
essence
of years
of
ago when it was here in LA at LACMA, it's just incredible. So anyone watching who gets the opportunity to go to that exhibit, highly recommend. It's incredible to see all that in person and get so many of those stories.
Very cool. Matthew, again, thank you very much, and thank you again to Movies Anywhere for sponsoring us today. Get on there, send a screen pass to all your friends, watch Full Metal Jacket together. It's totally cool. I'm Clint Gage, that's Terry Schwartz, Matthew Modine. Thank you so much again. We'll see you next time on Watch from Home Theater.
And download the Full Metal Jacket Diary app.
Heck
Yes.
yeah.